Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today's going to be very different than anything I've put out to date, but I'm really excited to share with you. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been having these one-on-one sessions with aspiring data professionals to go through their resume, their LinkedIn, and to also just answer any questions that they had. They've been a lot of fun, and most recently I met with Ben Xiao, who is a grad student at Northwestern, and honestly, I was planning to keep all of these private, but he actually reached out to me. He said, you know what, there's so many interesting tidbits of information that we went through during our session that he encouraged me to share it with you all so that you guys can also benefit from our discussion. Like I said, I'm going to put information to Ben. I think he's just getting started. I think you guys should kind of follow his journey as he gets his first data science job. So, like I said, I'm going to share the entire video with you guys, the entire session with you guys, and in the description, I've put very granular timestamp that you guys can use so you can skip through and figure out any specific section that you might be most interested in. Definitely encourage you to check that out because, like I said, the conversation really goes in many different directions throughout the entire hour session, and there's a lot to be gained from the beginning all the way to the end. Now, before I start playing the recording, there's a couple things I want to mention. In the description, I'm going to be including a form that you can submit if you want me to review your resume, your LinkedIn, or if you want us to set up a one-on-one session, right? Definitely submit, and I'll definitely get to your resume and LinkedIn as soon as possible. And also, if you're enjoying all this content and you want to stay tuned with all the new stuff I'm going to be putting out, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Your support is absolutely invaluable. So, like I said, please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. With that out of the way, I'll play the recording. Hope you guys enjoy it.
All right, sweet. So let's kind of get started. First, just kind of tell me about your background. How did you get into data science? I see you the nano degree, you got the MS in Northwestern, but how did you kind of pivot into the space?
So I spent, I think, somewhere between 4 and 5 years playing poker professionally.
Okay.
Spent a little time in the bio labs, so figured that wasn't really for me. But the poker stuff was really fun, and I was trying to figure out how to apply everything I learned in poker to doing something in real life. And the data science part made a lot of sense after seeing how sports uses it, where they have a lot of data. But the part that got me into it was seeing how people communicated with data, and so just seeing what you can gather visually from a really
Hmm.
nice chart made a lot of sense to me because you can look at it and it could probably be like 2 hours of discussion among people, but you look at it and it's very clear just looking at
Of
it
course.
spatially. So as I learned more about that from the nano degree, looked into like what more machine learning does, all of that stuff made a lot of sense as to how you think about stuff. And since the outputs are always usually probabilistic things,
Definitely.
those that fits in very well with how poker players think. So
Yeah.
all of that made perfect sense to me. And then, well, I tried to get a job after the nano degree, and it wasn't great. So I mean, what are you gonna do? Then, after getting into the master's degree was just hopefully to get a job, but just going learning more about it just meant there's there's never gonna be an end to how much you learn about data science.
I mean,
So,
it's infinite. It
yeah.
is it's absolutely infinite. I think anyone who claims to be a math or an expert, yeah, I think just it's unrealistic.
Yeah, most of it was just applying everything I know from poker to how people think about more real world problems. I think the degree, what really helped with that one is it helped frame all of the problems in a way where I can apply what I know
Totally.
and be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because before I always had issues, uh, going through your projects and explaining how something relates to what they do.
I gotta say, I kind of like the fact that you're focusing on the communication aspect of data science. I feel like a lot of people don't do that. They just see kind of the state of the art algorithms and just think it's a fully coding exercise, like data science is just coding. Whereas
Hmm.
for me, I realize probably 60% of my job is presenting, communicating, articulating what the model does. So I really like right off the bat that you're focusing on the communication aspect. I think it's absolutely key. With that, let's hop into your resume. I think I showed you kind of the breakdown of what we're going to discuss. I'm going to first just really go into the resume, give you like very concrete feedback with your resume, LinkedIn, and then I think it's kind of similar to what we're doing right now, which is have a really informal Q&A where you can probe and really dive into things that you're maybe worried about or you really want to get to the bottom of. But I feel like for now, I think the best bet would be to hop into the resume.
Okay.
Cool. I see that you are taking notes, but I will be kind of by the end of this week sending you a packet of kind of summarizing the things that I think you need to update.
Okay.
So look out for that as well.
Okay.
Cool. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I got it.
Great. And it's on my external monitor. So let me know if it's too small, if you can't see it well.
Oh no, it looks good.
All right, great. So, okay, so I'm gonna hop in and I'm a very candid person. So if I'm being too blunt, let me know if that's
No, don't worry about that. Just
But I think the more feedback I give you, the better it's gonna be for you in the long run, right? So I'm gonna be as critical as possible. First off, when I went through this, I think it sounds subtle and silly, but aesthetics really do matter when a recruiter is looking at your resume, right? The structure is easy to look at. That really does matter, even though we might not think it does. This is kind of structured as something that just has a bunch of text with no kind of borders, no kind of dividing lines between all the sections. So I would suggest spending time on just a aesthetic enhancement. And I know that's kind of vague, but I am going to give you this template. I'll send it with the packet.
Okay.
Feel free. I mean, obviously I want you to have your creative liberty, but you can kind of notice just right off the bat when you see this, everything is just really smooth, easy on the eyes, but also gives them all the information they need, right? It's not that different than the way you've structured it. It's just kind of easier on the eyes, right?
Okay.
And I think, like I said, subtle things like that do matter because it just can turn a product like hiring manager off when he sees something that's just too much text.
Okay.
Right. Cool. So I'm going to send that to you, right? So you'll have that so you can kind of plug and play, and then we can kind of go through your updated version when you kind of get to that. But for now, I definitely recommend you going to that template.
Okay.
Cool. So let's hop into the just education. I'm going to go just section by section and then just give you all the feedback that I have. The education, I think it's good. I would add GPA here. Right now, you don't have that much work experience, so there is going to be some leaning on your master's degree and your education, right? So it's important to show that you're doing really well or what have you, right? And I'll be very candid, if the GPA isn't that great, don't put it in, right? But if you feel like your GPA does warrant kind of, it's impressive, definitely share that because it'll look that much better. I do like if you have this one course here, and I noticed that you also showed another course down here that you're teaching assistant. Honestly, so I'm going to show you an example of another student of mine who structured their coursework that I think you should emulate. And again, I'm going to share all this with you so you have it. But if you see the way he's kind of structuring his coursework here, I know this might be the most impressive class you worked on. It's very deep learning oriented, but really just showcase all of the classes that you've done up until now that you would want a recruiter to know about. That's really important, and it gives a hiring manager an idea of what you've learned today, right? And it's not going to take up that much space. You see how this is pretty concise and consolidated? You can easily structure it this way, and I would recommend you do that. And then similarly, right? So I see in the bottom you have your work experience showing that you're a teacher's assistant. That can also be embedded just like this. Just so right off the bat, they see your education, what courses you've taken, and the fact that you're a teaching assistant. Having that consolidated in like just this area, let me highlight this, just this area is really great because it just gives them everything they want in one location. I like that you did the nano degree. I think this is maybe add some details on below this nano degree because I'll be honest, even when I first looked at this, I kind of glanced over the nano degree because it looks like it's almost embedded and like consolidated between your undergrad degree and the nano degree. So I would maybe add a little line below this, just providing an overview of some of the courses and what was in that nano degree. That would also be good to highlight. I know I'm going a little fast, but all makes sense.
Yeah, it was fine. I think it all makes sense.
And feel free to push back, right? If you have any questions, like, why are you suggesting this? Feel free to push back, right? I want to make sure you're on board and you do understand where I'm coming from when giving you all these suggestions.
Well, I had a question after you finished going through the education part. That was it was more about the coursework. Like I saw there's a lot of names of courses, but I always thought that was pretty abstract. So something like applied machine learning, it's hard to tell, how much depth was in that class. So how do you suggest, managing that part?
So that's perfectly fine. I don't think the resume needs to tackle that. The resume just needs to show these are the courses I've kind of tackled. And what'll happen a lot of the times is when you're in the interview, they'll ask like, oh, like which of these classes are your favorite? Or like, oh, I see you did this advanced machine learning class. What did you guys learn in that class? Or what was the final project? That is actually a great conversation starter and also great piece of information for them to probe.
Okay.
So you don't need to really dive into the detail here. Just make sure they have that in case they want to ask questions about it.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think you probably know this when you were like analyzing what master's degree to take, right? There's so many now, and the level of depth that each master's program goes into is very different, right? So highlighting all the coursework shows that you're in a master's program that really is comprehensive and has pretty technical coursework. Yeah, so I think like there is some skepticism about MS and data science because there are so many these days. So highlighting that would be really useful.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, so you could actually just remove this portion. I don't think you need a description of the coursework.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then if in your undergrad, if you did any, if you were a TA at all, or if you had a great GPA, make sure you include that as well. I think that'd be really useful. Not sure if you have that, but if you do, definitely include it. Because at the end of the day, this isn't obviously that applicable to what you're doing today, but it's can show kind of your technical aptitude, right? If you just show that you had a great GPA and what have you. So that's something to consider.
Okay.
So this is kind of going off the cuff, but I would remove this from your work section. I'm going to go ahead a little bit.
Okay.
I would remove the teaching experience, just show just one liner in your education that you were a teaching assistant. I would move this basketball for nerds above your projects. I think you'd want all your technical work experience to be above your project experience. It's something I always recommend.
Okay.
And then just from our discussion right now, I would definitely include the fact that you were a professional poker player. It seems kind of counterintuitive and you might think I wouldn't want to include that, but that shows a level of like intelligence that I think would be actually really impressive. Also, it makes you really unique and different as a candidate, right?
Okay, yeah, that was a part I didn't know how to ever include in the resume because it's always a mixed response from when people ask me about it.
So tell me about that. So you have used it before and you've spoken to hiring managers, recruiters before about that?
Yeah, it seems because it is partially gambling, and when you mention it that way, some people don't take it too well. A lot of other, it's very polarizing. Either it's all, oh, that's really interesting, or it's, oh, I don't see how that's related to anything.
Yeah, I guess I don't see that point of view. I mean, just to give you context, the data analytics manager in our group was a professional poker player. That kind of sounds a lot similar to your trajectory and your career growth. In my mind, it's just one aspect to your resume. It's not showcasing that you are a gambling addict and data science is your secondary goal, right? I don't think this resume really says that at all. I really
Okay.
wouldn't worry about that, honestly. But you could course correct, right? If you start seeing that's happening more and more frequently, then we can take it off, right? But
Right.
in my experience, having something like that would never be kind of a negative aspect to your resume.
Okay.
Yeah. Because like I just want to keep like address this point even more, right? I think when you're in these interviews, it's so monotonous for the hiring manager, right? They're in so many of these. So this kind of differentiating topic, differentiating conversation starter really goes a long way, right? Because you're just that much more memorable, which is everything when you're putting together a resume.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I've always just had a hard time figuring out how to talk about that part to people in general.
Yeah, I mean, when we like, I know you're gonna update this, and we can go through it again, like in the future. But we could go through kind of how to phrase it. Like, I wouldn't talk about how much you made. I would talk about like, I would also talk about your methodology, right? I'm sure you had a typical methodology, an analytical viewpoint for how you approach any situation. That might be worth including because it shows that you have a really analytical mindset. And I don't think that's like outlandish. I think it's probably very true to you as a professional poker player.
Right. Right.
So just spin it so that it's just highlighting the analytical part of the job versus the fact that you were gambling a ton of money and
Right.
a ton
Right.
of money, right? Cool. So that's all I had. I would put the work experience up top, but I will say that's you've heard of the term A/B testing, right? Or
Yes. Yes.
yeah, right. So I think as you apply more, you see how receptive people are. You might end up thinking, okay, maybe project experience be above. Personally, I always put work experience above because you do have some significant work experience, but you have to play with it, right? Over time, we could figure out what works better. But since this is a one pager, I think you're going to be fine regardless.
Okay. Do you have any input on, people putting a set of skills in their resume? So for us, it'd be, like programming languages or certain libraries.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So since you're gonna basically gain some space by removing Yummy World Restaurant and putting like a one-liner about being a professional poker player, I would definitely include a section like this. And like I said, in the write-up I'm gonna send you, I put a screenshot of this so you have it for reference, but something like this would be very, very useful, right? And I strongly recommend you put obviously the machine learning skill sets you have, but programming and toolkits are just as important, right? Like if you work with the AWS suite, right? If you're comfortable with S3, EC2, things like that are absolutely critical to include, right? It'll really set you apart. It'll show that you could probably hit the ground running when you go into any data science organization versus having to probe and figure out when you can, if you can or can't. Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely, I would want you to include this section.
Okay. So like using that one as an example,
Sure.
it how do you decide, say like what to put in there? Because I can say I can do Excel, but I probably can't do it very well. But it's not like I'm totally lost in it.
I think that would be fine to include. So what you really want to avoid is if they probed on how did you use X, right? If they probe in that sense and you don't have a sufficient answer, then don't include it. Okay, that's kind of my rule of thumb. And in Excel, you can talk about anything, right? You build pivot charts to do X, Y, Z. It doesn't mean you have to do like VBA code, right? You can just show that you use it to analyze, make presentations, and articulate a point, right? That's completely fine. And that wouldn't like count against you at all.
Okay, and say like the machine learning part, that
Yep.
that one specifically has a lot of stuff in there. How do you, decide when it's too much?
It's a great point. I think this is probably a bit much. It really depends on the space that you have, honestly. So if you have the space that warrants highlighting more machine learning models, include it. If you don't sacrifice space in other aspects of the resume for the skill section, right? That's kind of my rule of thumb. So if so let's take a scenario, right? If you had the option of highlighting skills in the work experience text versus highlighting it in the skill section, always pick the work experience text, right? You want those skills to be highlighted in like the body of your descriptions versus just being highlighted in the skill section.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think a rule of thumb when you're like actually going about building the resume, include these sections there, but focus on building a comprehensive, solid set of descriptions for your projects, and then fill in the skill section after.
Okay. So in terms of the say like the hierarchy of where to put what you can do, you put it work experience, and then would you say projects over skills?
Yes, definitely. Now let's hop into, oh, let's see what we're doing in time. Oh, this is perfect. Let's hop into the projects, right? So let me see. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a bunch of questions and then it'll help us kind of figure out what needs to be added, right?
Okay.
So you mentioned removing irrelevant data points, right? Can you just tell me like how you went about doing that? Like what was the process of figuring out what's irrelevant?
The first step in that one was removing things that were miscategorized. So things that were not related to video games, I removed all of those. And
So did
then
you use some technique to do that, or was it just eyeballing it and figuring out what's irrelevant?
I went through, or I programmed to look at the description, and then there are certain things that have two labels, say like a steering wheel, which is a legitimate gaming peripheral for like
Hmm?
sim racing people.
Yep.
But there's a lot of those that got miscategorized into video games, and I know they don't fit because I know what those wheels are. So there's things
So
like that I removed. I looked through to see if there are any odd points that did not relate, that were not video games and had double labels. So I removed any of those.
So that's actually really impressive, right? You programmatically use your domain knowledge to clean this data set, right? That should
Mhm.
definitely be highlighted here, right? I think just mentioning the fact that you use Python to programmatically do X, Y, Z, right? Like highlight the fact that you didn't go through the manual route or it wasn't a simple just filtering process, because this kind of makes it seem like it was a trivial task, right? I think it should be really apparent that it took some level of skill to go about doing this, right? So I would definitely make that apparent.
Okay.
I like this quite a bit. You immediately showcase the scale of the problem, showcase some NLP techniques. I think that's fantastic. When I look at this text modeling frameworks and ensemble models, I think I would elaborate on what models you actually used here, right? So I'm like you're mentioning F1, so you're definitely using some sort of classification model, right? But highlight which ones. This goes back to my previous point, right? Like if you can highlight the skill in the body of the description, definitely do it.
Okay, so there's been a lot of different feedback I've gotten on that, which is that a lot of times it's recruiters who are seeing your resume first, and they're not always the most technical people. So I was wondering how how much jargon do you put into something like this? Because if it's just a bunch of jargon, then the recruiters are never going to be able to understand it, and then all they're going to do is compare it to the job listing and see what matches.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I'm not saying, because what I imagine, you say ensembles models, right? And then you put parentheses random forest, right? It's still legible, but from their perspective, and they also might see when their hiring manager hands over a list of requirements, they might actually list those specific essentially criteria, right? Like, oh, I want, like, if he has these models in there, that's a plus, right? Those things get relayed from the hiring manager to the recruiter. So including them is definitely useful. And maybe it might be coming off the wrong way, but I don't want this written, like I said, in technical jargon. Just kind of include those there as a parentheses, or just, because let's go back to this previous question, or sorry, previous bullet. You could just say use Python and subject matter knowledge to clean irrelevant and missing data points in the data set. Like, it could be that simple, and I think that would get the job done.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's a great point, right? It can be kind of overwhelming for recruiters if they can't understand anything you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's always what the first interview is with the recruiter. It is like, yeah, I'm always balancing like, how do I explain this? And then you remember they're not the technical people, so it probably gets not very fun for either of us if it gets too much jargon.
It's a fair point, but at the end of the day, they do need to vet, like, do you know your stuff, right? So
Yeah.
you also have to think of the perspective, oh, if this is like in general layman's terms, anyone could have written this, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really show me he knows his stuff. It just shows me he was able to Google a bunch of things and put it into his resume, right?
Okay.
So that also, like, it's a fine line for sure, but if you're going to go to one side or the other, I would go slightly technical versus slightly kind of in layman's terms.
Okay.
You don't want to come off unintelligent, right?
Okay.
Not the goal.
Okay.
Cool. Optimization. This is also seems like a really cool project, so I would love to just hear about it after. But this, I think, is a great line. I think this is perfect, the right level of detail. So you're noticing how, like, there is some jargon in here, but it's still easy to read.
Right.
This same kind of methodology, thought process that you went through to write this line should be used here as well.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, and I see this happen so often where, like, students will get it right on the money in like one part of the resume, and then for some reason do the exact opposite in another part of the resume. So this is kind of a great kind of example of how you can throw some jargon in there, but not have it be overwhelming for a recruiter.
Okay.
Design and engineer accompanying data visualizations. I think this is really good. One thing I would mention on this one is, what did you do with this, right? Did you present it somewhere, and did you actually monitor the performance of this ETF, right? Like, do you have any stats on that front? I think that would be really cool to highlight, just because it's just interesting and people would want to know, like, how well did you actually do?
Okay.
Did it do well, if you don't mind asking?
Well, it was one of our projects, so we kind of cheated with it. We would optimize it based from hindsight. So no, it didn't do well, but I think that's partially because of, what was it, when that Facebook data leak happened, everything just kind of tanked.
So you could highlight that, right? Like, and I don't want you to spend too many lines, but like, performance was -5%, and partially due to the Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, what's it called, like, lawsuit or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's completely fine to write, but what's also important to showcase is you've thought about what you've produced and where it's not performing well. And if you do have a lesson learned, that's also not a bad thing to add here. If you could fit it in, right? But
Right.
if you have some lesson learned and like next steps, it's also really useful.
So just, this is showing, the context of the results and then why it's useful.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Cool. So this data visualization one, right? I would definitely highlight what tools you use, right? Did you use Tableau? Was it mainly in Matplotlib? Like, I would definitely highlight that. It's really important. I'll be honest, it seems like a pretty simple exercise, right? Like, I don't know if you just downloaded the census data and then just analyzed it in Python. That could be it. But in my opinion, this is on the simpler side. If you have other kind of, if you like analyzed it and find any other insights, that'd probably be good to add as well. Just because, I mean, I'll be really honest, right? Like just figuring out what's above the national average and what's below isn't really that difficult, right? So maybe add more detail here if you have it, right? And feel free to let me know if you think this is the extent of the project. But I do worry that this really doesn't drive home like a large, like that much of an impact on your resume.
Okay. So the data visualization projects, I always have a hard time thinking about how to present it in text because most of it is going to be you need to look at it to see like why it's interesting at all. Like what design choices you made to go about that. So do you have any advice on say like should I link to it? What do I do to
I was going to
show
suggest
it?
that, right? You can definitely link to it, and more often than not, people are looking at resumes on their computers, right? So easily they can go to it. So I would definitely link to it here or wherever you can here.
Okay, then trying to talk about it like you know when you make something like this, you go through different types of charts and so how do you then you know present that there was more work into it than just filtering through data?
I mean, they talk about the methodologies that you used, right? Like I'm sure maybe you use a nuanced feature within matplotlib that you think is impressive, right? So highlight that. Definitely, like for sure, as a baseline, highlight the fact that you use matplotlib. That's definitely critical. Like just, or I don't know what you use, right? But highlight what plotting tool that you use, and then highlight specific features within matplotlib that you think is impressive. That probably would be my best bet to convey how technical this project was.
Okay.
That makes sense? Because
Yeah.
it just, if you think about it from my perspective, right? If you just read this, it doesn't sound like you actually did that much. It sounds like something you could have done in an hour, right? It obviously took you a lot more time than that, right? So you have to
Right.
showcase. You have to showcase that. And linking it will definitely do that, but highlighting matplotlib and the fact that you've used an animation tool, Funk animation in matplotlib, all that stuff would be, I'm just saying something that's slightly more complex, but
Right.
just put your own version of that.
Okay, I think that makes sense. It's kind of like how you say you have to show that you can do something that they can't do.
Exactly, right? Or
Okay.
just show that it took more effort than it's being shown right now, right? Show that like,
Okay.
oh wow, he probably had to go through a bunch of documentation and learn something outside of coursework, etc. Right? Like give them that perception.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. So that's all I had for the resume, right? I know that was quite a bit, but like I said, I'm gonna be sending a package over so you have kind of all these details. I want to quickly go to your LinkedIn, and this will be more quick because we've gone through most of the meat of it, but I did have some points. There you go. Oh wow, you grew your hair out.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a haircut in like a year.
the COVID
Yeah.
COVID slick back. I love it. Okay, so I want to highlight a few things here. Just LinkedIn, I think I really want you to take everything we went through the resume and apply that to your LinkedIn, right? I think that goes without saying, because LinkedIn, I think it's going to be far more useful to you in the long run as we work on just the way you start engaging with the tool. Because I'll tell you, like, sure, I'm more senior, but at this point, I actually haven't used my resume in the past like 3 years. Any opportunity, any interview has just come through LinkedIn and LinkedIn alone.
Okay.
And it seems like recruiters just want to go this route also. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
So a few things, I would add some sort of visualization here, not visualization, some just picture, something along those lines, right? I think it just makes the whole, your LinkedIn more aesthetically pleasing, and it makes it seem like you put effort into it, which also goes a long way.
Okay.
It shows that you're just taking it really seriously, which I think, like I said, goes a long way.
Okay.
I think your about isn't bad. I would just highlight more about your kind of mission in data science, what type of data science you're interested in. You highlight that you're a master's student, but talk about the fact that you're a professional poker player. I would also highlight your skills here. Just kind of, you know, that first section in your LinkedIn, make sure that's kind of all present here as well. But you use this as an opportunity to kind of talk about yourself, right? Like, don't be shy, right? Highlight the fact that you have had a diverse background and then you're kind of doing really cool things in data. Okay. Okay, so I think you probably know what I'll say here, but the fact that you have more detail on your resume versus your LinkedIn is definitely not a great thing.
Okay.
Usually be the other way around. You definitely have more detail on your LinkedIn versus your resume. So definitely take whatever we discussed on your resume and make sure that's included here.
Okay. And in the LinkedIn, should it be bullet pointed like just like the
Yes.
resume, or okay?
Yeah, so I'll show you. So you see like bullet points here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And so I will notice, so it's good that you have projects here, but if I'm going to give you like one piece of homework, and it sounds like so cheesy, but I want you to start writing about all these projects you're doing, right? Like get on Medium and just do what you love, right? You love the communication aspect of it, right? You love communicating. You love, sorry. You love kind of taking this blank canvas of a problem statement and communicating why it's important to work on that problem, your problem statement, and how you went about solving it, and then the end result. Showcase your ability to do that in an article, right? I think it's a lot of work, but if you do that, that'll go a very long way in terms of getting yourself noticed on LinkedIn. Because I'll be honest, very few people actually look at this. Like, just they don't, right? And I'll show you this one section that has helped me out. So you notice I have this like featured section.
Yeah.
So with like projects, etc., right? That once you start posting your articles, you want to have that section here as well.
How do
Like,
you get it to show up in your featured section there? Because I know you write a lot of Medium articles, and they show up on your site's blog.
Yep.
Oh, so you just add it yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you just add posts.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but simple. So like these are a wide variety, right? I think this is. I'll show you like so see all. I'll show you right now. One sec. Let me just add. I think I have like one that'd be a good example. Oh, it doesn't go that far back, I guess. Anyways, so what'll happen is it'll just show up as a link to your Medium article, and then that's that. But you could definitely feature it, and it would look a lot like this. But instead of a YouTube link, it would just show your Medium article. It's really, really common.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. I've been trying to write everything more. Just getting back into the habit of writing again is it's a lot of work.
No, so it is so much work. But look, I would just say like at this point in your career, there's absolutely no excuses, right? Like I was working full time and then was like literally spending all night trying to write any interesting Medium article just to get kind of my name out there. I think it's absolutely important for you to do this like just hustle right now so that you can start building momentum because LinkedIn is such a great social network in the sense that like if you start seeing some engagement on your posts, their network sees it and then their network sees it, right? It's such a great way to kind of get your name out there for people that matter and the people that can give you a potential job. Like stuff like that really matters. And like if you just notice, right, like this feature section just makes your profile look more presentable, right? It's so subtle, but it just makes it seem like you're like, I don't know. It's just you're organizing your information in a really like aesthetic way, which I think goes a long way.
Okay. So I'm not complaining about writing the articles at all. It was more like I haven't written that much in a while, so it's been actually I just finished an article for something, so that took I think like 2 weeks to write like 2,000 words, and I was really surprised at how hard it was just to write it. First of all, I actually got a really good question from one of my classmates recently. Is when you're writing these articles, who do you think you're writing it for? Because we can get very technical with our metrics and stuff, but I don't think pigeonholing yourself into that audience is a good way to do it. So he and I are wondering, how general do you make your articles about your projects?
Yeah, I'll send you a Medium article that I think addresses that. But whenever I write, I come from an educator's perspective. So I write as if I'm teaching the topic that I'm um, describing, right?
Right.
That's always the way I go. I mean, everyone has their own point of view, but the reason I say that and the reason I really want to go that route is because like you said, technical recruiters aren't that technical, right? So if you're able to showcase that you can clear and concisely articulate what you did in this project to someone who isn't technical, it goes a long way. Because not only does it show that you worked on a cool project, but it also shows that when you're in their team, you'll be able to communicate with product managers, marketers, etc. Right? So I think it's really important to kind of talk to their level.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll show you like comparing. Yeah, I'll like send you this article and like the package, but this is like the first article I put together, not first, but one of the first articles I put together where like it's technical at times, but I definitely want to keep it pretty like layman's terms so that anyone can appreciate the article.
Do you have, say, like a preferred length of article that you try to target?
No, I don't. I just write like what's needed. You know what I mean? Like if a specific article warrants 2,000 words, that's fine. If a specific article only warrants 700 words, that's fine. I just go with like, what's the appropriate amount of content to get everything I need to get across with this specific article.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I
Yep.
think this is a really good exercise to begin with, just because you as you write after you write it, you have a really good way, or you have a good idea of how to talk about it when you're asked about it later.
Totally. And when you write about it, it solidifies your understanding of the topic as well.
Right.
Because like you never know, right? You go through a project for school, and then when you start writing about it, you'll start realizing, oh wait, like I forgot this detail. Oh wait, like how did this actually work? And it helps you refresh, and like you said, helps you talk about it when you're actually in front of an interviewer.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah, that is definitely something I've been trying to get more into. I didn't know there was a featured section, so that would be nice to have in the profile too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and what I recommend, so start small, but start posting more, right? Start once a week, right? It's super easy to do, but you could post anything, right? Like you can post like, oh, like today I posted something about this new resource that you can find data sets, right? Post about that. Like, hey, I found this cool data set site, yada, 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 right? Just do that more regularly and more frequently, just so you start to build a bit of a presence on LinkedIn. I'm not saying try to be an influencer, right? I'm not like suggesting that. I'm just saying like just get your name out there a bit more, because the network effect is so prevalent within LinkedIn that it'll help out tremendously, because you'll just show up in front of so many people's feeds that you didn't even realize you were going to.
Okay. So, I mean, okay, you mentioned you were working full time while you were doing all of this. And some of these projects might take you like a month,
Yeah.
especially when some of the bigger ones. Like, how did you balance working, educating yourself on something that might be coming up, and then still having the time to play with all of that to make something to write about?
Yeah, that's a great question. At this point, I've kind of showed you everything, so I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, and I can pull it up if need be, but for me, I really try to structure it like a project for work, right? I say, okay, these 2 weeks, I'm gonna build all my features. 3 weeks after that, I'm gonna tune my model. After that, I'm gonna get the results I need, or I'm gonna finalize my model. And then I'm gonna take the last 3 weeks to write about it. So I like set up an actual project schedule so that I'm organized, and I'm also like just keeping track of where I need to be when working on any new project. I usually do one project at a time. And then I always like on my schedule will carve out and like block out time every night to work on it, or every other night. Whatever works for me. But it's really important to be meticulous with the way you're structuring your time, just so you're not either overwhelming yourself or you're not kind of getting delayed.
Okay, yeah. I've had that issue of just there's so many things you want to work on, and then they all kind of get stuck in the beginning phases, and then you kind of wonder how do you move it past that? And
So
that part's
let
just
me show you this one tool I've been using. It's free, it's online. What is it? Okay, let me share my screen again. Should have just had it open. So I think you were posting on YouTube quite a bit, just trying to help educate and whatnot. But
yeah.
this has helped me quite a bit to help structure all the random ideas I've had. So I actually recommend this for even people working on their own projects, right? So what you can do is just do an exercise. So it's called notion.so.
Okay.
Like I said, free. You could just go through this exercise where you come up with a ton of use cases, right? Come up with a ton of use cases for projects that would be interesting to you. And then essentially start ranking them based off complexity, and then put them here, right? And then now you have like a schedule for when you should be doing what. And you could put your status up here. And then what I also do is leave this open all the time. So when I hop on my laptop, I see this, and all of a sudden I'm already like restructured. My brain is finally organized again, and I know what I need to be doing. Because I'm in the same boat, and I tend to get pretty unorganized because I have so many ideas and I can be pretty scatterbrained.
Right.
So
right.
having this be the first thing I see really helps me kind of immediately level set and immediately focus on what is the correct task at the moment.
Okay.
And what's really
Okay.
cool about this is you click open, and then you could put together a bunch of notes. So for me, this is like a one-stop shop for one, organize what I need to do, and what are the details for each task.
Okay. That's a really helpful tool. This would help a lot in just writing things down. Because right now I just have notes like everywhere.
I mean, I used to be the same way. I just started using this like 2 months ago, and I wish I had it a long time ago because do that exercise, right? Like another kind of action item I would say is just like go through an exercise where you just scour through Kaggle, you scour through all the dataset websites, find data sets, come up with use cases, and come up with a large pool of use cases, and then wind down, and then come up with a handful that you think would be valuable projects for your portfolio.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So like,
I think that covers everything. There's always plenty of things I have to work on, and I know I'm good enough to do the job. Listening to all your talks and stuff. I didn't know, what to do with my LinkedIn or resume at this point. So this is really helpful stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad this was helpful, and also the portfolio aspect is definitely the most critical, right? Because at the end of the day, your portfolio needs to show that to a recruiter, to a hiring manager, if this guy were to come into my team, he would hit the ground running. Your projects need to show that,
Okay.
right? And so keep that in mind. That's really important because a lot of people don't. A lot of people just assume that their coursework and their course projects would just carry them the whole way. And also, I think I'm just thinking of some advice I want to leave you with, right? I think just highlighting the fact that you are working on a project on your free time, and you're spending your free time working on and going the extra mile goes a long way, right? It shows true passion for data science versus someone who just does their class projects and assumes that's going to get them a job. right? It's really important to go the extra mile because recruiters see that. They definitely see that, and like, trust me, like it's absolutely critical.
Okay, then just one last thing. Like, how
Yeah.
well do you think I'm positioned to get an entry level job at this point?
I would say based on your skill set, I'm assuming you're the one working on all these projects, right? I would say you probably have the skills to do well. It's hard to know without looking at the notebook or your code and like how well you are able to code at the moment. But I would think right now you do need more projects for sure. I think the lack of projects and kind of content that you could put out is going to make it really tough to get a job right now. If I'm being
Well,
really
what do you
honest.
mean by lack of projects? Like, do you mean more recent ones, or do you mean like a more varied skill set?
From my perspective, what I see is someone who is just putting out projects that are coursework,
Okay.
right? So what you could potentially do, and this is just an assumption I made, right? But what you could potentially do is just in your resume, note what's a personal project and what's a school project, right? So that people see that, oh, wow, this isn't just coursework. This is actually stuff he's doing in his personal time. That I think, like I said, goes a long way.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I told you
Okay.
I was gonna be very candid, but
No, that's really helpful stuff. It's perfectly fine. We kind of all need to know like where we are positioned compared to the rest of the candidates, anyways.
yeah, I would say like I'm assuming you have the technical skill set, right? But it's just important to, like I said, I'm gonna say it over and over again, but it's important to really just highlight that you can do the end-to-end process, right? Like if I were to think about a project for you, it would be a project where there's a blank canvas, you don't do a ton of feature engineering, you build a predictive model, you tune the predictive model, and then you have some results at the very end, right? Like show that you can do the entire ML workflow in a project that you've put together.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Just thinking like there's plenty of things I have in mind to work on that for. So the rest of it is just doing the homework now.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like we can have like multiple sessions over time, right? Just to like work through projects together. If you need help kind of just debugging, like I said, this doesn't just have to be about resumes. Like I want the end goal is to get you a job, right? At the end of the day, like I want to be as kind of candid and there in the weeds so that you are kind of well equipped. So like as you start building projects, as you start writing about your projects, I kind of want to be there for you, right? Like I want to be able to like help you through that whole process. If you're interested, obviously.
Okay. So where would be the best place to say like contact you for where I might need some feedback on this stuff?
So you have my email, but I could definitely give you my number, or like email is something I'm readily accessible.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think so. We still have a few minutes, and if you have any more questions, we can definitely tackle them.
I think that covers it for now. There's lots of things I always want to work on, so this helps me get organized to see what make a note of what I need to do and how to do it step by step. Because these data science projects are so big. I'm always like, there's a lot to do. It's hard to get started.
So I would say, like, if I were to break down action items, right, and like obviously you do with it what you will, but take the projects you've done right now and start writing about them, right? If there is like, or at least write about the NLP one, right? Just work through that exercise with the project you already have, with the code you already have, and then start there. Then go to brand new projects, because right now you have a lot of content that isn't written about yet. So I would start there.
Okay, yeah, that was exactly what I was gonna do, just to get back into the exercise of writing to begin with.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you went through the entire thing, kudos to you. I know that was a lot of content, but like I said, I really hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'll reiterate, if you want to kind of go through the same process or want me to review your resume on LinkedIn, there's a form in the description that you can take advantage of, and I'll definitely kind of get to your content as soon as possible or schedule a one-on-one session as soon as possible as well. Like I said, if you did like it, subscribe, your support is absolutely invaluable, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.